Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Film Brits podcast. I'm your host Trilbee, the Lieutenant Aldo Rain of film criticism, and welcome to episode 2 of Film Brits. Now, thank you so much to the response to the last week's Film Brits. Honestly, because of the hiatus and the general lack of content on my channel over the past few months, I was expecting maybe a couple of hundred views for a podcast. Maybe if it was shorter, more people would have watched it. But within a day, it had over 1,000 views, which I thought was really good. It had some good figures on SoundCloud, and also, yes, there is an audio version of this if you don't want to see my ugly mug, my unshaven face fuzz, or whatever. If you don't want to see any of that, then you can just go on iTunes or SoundCloud. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave a review if you are enjoying the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for that. There's a slight, there is a reason that there is a slight delay on this podcast. I want to do it every weekend. However, this weekend my laptop has kind of frazzled a little bit. It was running incredibly slowly. It wouldn't connect to anything. I could barely even open a internet browser, let alone record a podcast. So what I did was that I took hundreds of gigabytes worth of stuff out of the laptop, put it on a hard drive, did some virus scans, did some defragging, cleared it up, and it seems to be running okay for now. So I figured now that it's working, let's get a podcast done before I probably just jinxed this whole thing, haven't I? Now it's just going to screw up completely. So let's do what I normally do in the opening segment of the Film Brits podcast. Let us share the love. Now in this segment we talk about someone online or someone in the film punditry community who deserves some love. Now, the previous podcast host from Film Brits when it first started was Sam Gavin from Sam's channel. He's a great YouTuber, he does some great content, check him out, but the reason I'm going to share the love to him is because this is actually a happier story unlike last week, where a few weeks ago, well, it was actually a few months ago, Sam and his girlfriend were preparing for a trip to Barcelona on holiday for the summer. However, Sam was involved in a motorcycle accident and he broke some ribs, he fractured his wrist, he was pretty much messed up a little bit, and he was in hospital, and he and his girlfriend had to skip their holiday. However, it was so amazing on his Instagram last week to see him and his girlfriend going to Barcelona and having their holiday. He has made what I can tell is a full recovery, so let's share the love to Sam. Hope he had a great summer holiday, hope he's recovering well, hope everything's fine after his shake-up on the motorbike. And yeah, let's share the love to Sam. You can find him on Twitter at Samuel Gavin. You can find him on YouTube at Sam's channel. You can find his Facebook page, Sam's channel. Just follow him on all of his outlets and just tell him that it's great that he's back up and running. He's not a machine. Yeah, but he is now all good, at least as far as I can tell. So Sam, hope you're doing well. And yeah, let's get on with some news. Now, this is Film Brits. Let's talk TV, and I know what people are thinking, this is only episode 2 and he's already run out of ideas. Well, it's September, it's kind of a slow news month. I do some writing on geekfeed.com and we've even been saying, yeah, there's not a lot of news going around, so let's see what else we can come up with. But really for this, the big news story of the past week has been Channel 4 buying the Great British Bake Off from BBC One for £75 million. And yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about. A lot of people have been saying, why are you covering this? Why is this news? Why are so many people bent out of shape about this? Why is this a big deal? And yeah, of course, in the broad cultural context, it's not a massive deal. There was the Paralympics, there was the New York bombs, there's all of this stuff happening, the presidential campaign, there's Brexit. In the broad scheme of things, this is not a massive deal. But I think in terms of what it says about the industry at the moment, as well as what it says about Channel 4 and the work it's done over the past few months, I think it speaks volumes about the state of British television. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, Channel 4 in 2010 was a pretty poor show. It was basically a laughingstock amongst the community. It was basically just a place where terrible shows could go. It lost Big Brother. And that's how bad things got. It lost probably the lowest common denominator thing ever. It was in a very bad place. Advertising fees for it were at an all-time low, and it was basically a channel on so close to flatlining. It was not doing very well. Enter Jay Hunt in 2011, and she is the current Chief Creative Officer for Channel 4. She previously served as the Director of Programmes for Channel 5, as well as Controller of BBC One, and in 2011 she was asked to basically run the Head of Commissions for Channel 4, which she accepted. And ever since then, Channel 4 has undergone a massive revolution. A broadcaster that lost Big Brother and was basically known as smut television was really starting to make waves. We had Humans, which is the sci-fi series, which I don't think was that good. I thought it was marketed incredibly well, and I think the concepts were great, but no way, no how did that need to be 10 episodes. 3 episodes, most. It was so drawn out, but it was a massive success. In fact, it was in terms of viewing figures, because pure numbers, it was the most successful program that drama that Channel 4 had done for about 11 years. It was a massive hit. Then we've got shows like Gogglebox, Goggle Sprogs, Blind Dates, and all of these pseudo-reality shows that were able to take Big Brother's place and become cost-effective hits. We had The Last Leg, which started off in 2012, and it was meant to be just a small thing, almost a one-off with the Paralympics. And what happened was that they filmed a pilot. They filmed. It was Greg Davis, it was Alex Brooker, and I can't remember the name of that other comedian. I feel really bad now. But yeah, they filmed that, and they had no idea what they were doing with it. It was basically just get a studio at the Paralympics, and then they would just have some banter for a bit. And really, the first pilot, the first few episodes, not very good. But then, after a few years, it found its footing, and I think that The Last Leg is now just some of the best television, period. Forget studio commentary, forget comedy, forget all. It's just one of the best shows on television at the moment, and I'm gutted that it's not on all year round. It really should be, because it's a terrific show. Yeah, they've had The Last Leg, and they've been given that a big push. Channel 4 also got the Paralympics, which they've been having a huge marketing push for. And I know more people, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I actually know more people who talk about the Paralympics and watch the Paralympics than the actual Olympics. Channel 4 have done such a great job with that. And Channel 4, it's won Broadcaster of the Year in 2014, it won Broadcaster of the Year again in 2016, and it's had these massive shows, these huge successes, whereas the BBC has kind of flip-flopped in that regard. I'm not going to say that the BBC is now in danger of dying, or if it is doing badly. There is some good content on the BBC, but it is sort of stagnating. It is losing its budget. Its budget is getting lower and lower every single year as the license fee is becoming less valuable to people, and more people are giving up their license fee now than ever before. And as a result, budgets go down, and that means that costs have to be more spread out. You lose some of the bigger talent. It lost Top Gear, of course, and then, it didn't lose Top Gear. Jeremy Clarkson and Richard Hammond and James May left to pursue the Grand Tour, which is debuting on Amazon next month. They tried it again with Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc too. It started off okay in the ratings, but then it just went downhill from there, and they might not even bring it back. I think Chris Evans has gone. So who knows if they're going to bring anybody back. And I think what really, one of the biggest moments culturally in terms of TV over the past few years has been the Great British Bake Off and Strictly Come Dancing. Those have been the two cherries on top of the hypothetical BBC cake here. Even Doctor Who, which started off incredibly well, has sort of been declining in quality and declining in viewerships. Now that viewership has been going elsewhere in terms of BBC iPlayer and on-demand viewing, and the whole dynamics of the audience viewership is changing, and it's getting harder to determine what is a success nowadays, and that's becoming a big topic in the industry right now. But Doctor Who is not the show it was, and it is in need of some revitalization, but we're not going to be getting that for another 2 years. And we've also got BBC Three changing formats, which it's done very well in the factual programming, but in terms of its scripted content, it has yet to really break any mainstream barriers. But Bake Off and Strictly Come Dancing have been great shows for the BBC, and it served them well. And when you talk about the Bake Off in the industry, the big moment of the peak of its success was Nadia Hussain winning Bake Off 2015. That is just one of the biggest cultural moments on television of the past few years, because you've got this, not to bring too much politics into the game, but you do have this incredibly divisive community right now in Britain, where there is this whole anti-immigration, this whole anti-Muslim rhetoric. Brexit was just a terrible example of the whole thing. And then you get, this obviously happened months before Brexit, but you do have this moment where you have this mainstream show, you've got this incredibly likeable, lovable figure, Nadia, a prominent a personality who wins Bake Off, and then you just felt, it's going to sound terrible, but this is kind of like how, this is the broad way to describe it. You have Nadia do some incredible baking, make some great cakes, and then she wins Bake Off, and then you've just got people all over the country going, I guess those Muslims just want to bake cakes, and they want to be nice, and they have families, and they're normal people. It sounds like a gross simplification, but that is culturally what that moment kind of signified for many people, at least in the broad mainstream. And that happened, and then when it's been voted one of the best moments of like TV of the past few years. Whenever there's a montage of 2015 television, that montage of Nadia saying that she's not going to tell herself she can't do it is always in those moments. It's always in those montages, and the fact that that was the peak of Bake Off, and halfway through the next season, not even halfway through the next season, it's announced that Channel 4, this program on the mend, this broadcaster that is now really starting to make a name for itself and really making waves once again, has snatched it up. I think that's a big deal. You get this show that was at its peak, and then Channel 4, who were on the rise, take it, and it's going to be interesting what they do with it. There have been rumours that Nadia is actually going to be one of the co-hosts of it. Apparently Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood and Sue and Mel are not going to be returning, which we think the BBC might have written into their contracts, like if it gets picked up by a new broadcaster or a new company, that they cannot go with the series. So it'll be interesting what Channel 4 do with the format. But this is like a huge, like, symbolic moment of the advertiser-driven broadcaster Channel 4. Really taking one of the most popular public-funded shows of the past few years, Bake Off, because it's paid by the public, it's paid by the license fee, taking it off them and trying to do something else with it. Now, it's too early to tell exactly what direction it's going to go in, but I think that's really important, at least in terms of this whole, in terms of the industry. Like, I've did a lot of work for ITV over the past week, and this news broke on Monday. And when I went into work the next day, everyone was like, did you hear about Bake Off? Did you hear about what is going on? In the industry, at least, it's made waves, and people are genuinely shocked at what's happened. But I think anyone who's been paying attention to Channel 4 over the past few years will have, maybe not have seen this coming, but they will have known that Channel 4 is now a broadcaster not to be messed with, and you can thank Jay Hunt for that. I had the pleasure of meeting Jay Hunt at the Edinburgh International Television Festival, where Channel 4 won Broadcaster of the Year, and she's an amazing woman. Yeah, she's a badass. She's absolutely knows what she's doing, what she wants business-wise. She just completely knows, her head is in that game. And I think that the fact that under her leadership, Channel 4 has been able to make a big name, and now Channel 4 has almost single-handedly in the UK made advertiser-driven content much more feasible, and it's great for advertisers because more people are watching the show, which means that their money goes a lot further, which means they sink more money into the programming. And Channel 4 do have a premium price on advertising now for that very reason, justifiably so. And then they snap up something from the BBC. Yeah, you can see why it was one of the top news stories from BBC News the day it happened. Like, it was like the second or third news story of that day on BBC News, which my girlfriend's dad was watching. It's like, why is just Bake Off? It's just Bake Off. And yes, it is just Bake Off, and it is just a move to Channel 4 possibly, but in terms of everything that has been building up over the past few years between the BBC and Channel 4, BBC's slow gradual decline and Channel 4's rise to prominence, yeah, I think that's the narrative here. And I think it's very interesting. At least I think it's interesting. It's probably not interesting to anybody else, but what do I know? I'm just some guy with tea talking about TV on a film podcast. And I'll drink to that. I'm not a massive fan of Bake Off. I did watch last series and I did enjoy it, but this series has not really been doing it for me. Like lots of people are very, very obsessed with it and really love it, and it's great that we do have that niche, but I am interested. I'm very curious what Channel 4 are going to do with it. So yeah, that's really all I've got to say about that. I just think it's worth considering from that perspective, from that outlook about, I guess, what Channel 4 have been doing over the past few years. Like, even in these articles talking about Channel 4 taking the show, Jay Hunt is always name-checked. A lot of the move is also apparently the fact that Love Productions, who were making the show the success that it was, wanted more money for the show, and the BBC weren't giving it to them. Whether or not they were, I don't believe the BBC were being stubborn. Like I said, Bake Off has been incredibly huge and good to them. There's a surprisingly big merchandising what would you call it, merchandising effort around Bake Off. There's a lot of Bake Off cookbooks. Mary Berry's got her own BBC Christmas cooking show. They've got a lot of this stuff. They do like to keep these stars happy because they like Bake Off and the success that it brings them. So they wouldn't have let it go unless they had no alternative. And Channel 4 probably just had a lot more money and were able to make Love Productions a better offer. So I don't blame Love Productions for that, but yeah, it kind of sucks for the BBC, but it's good for Channel 4, I guess. It will just be interesting what new talent they bring on board, and if Nadia Hussain is going to be one of the hosts, then yeah, that's a really interesting development, and that is a way to get people on board, definitely. And yeah, after Top Gear, what's going to happen is Strictly going to go to ITV next. I don't know, we'll find out what happens. But let's move on to a new topic. Let's move on to Blu-ray of the week. Now, oh my god, I just realised I'm talking about television again. Yeah, not much came out movie-wise on Blu-ray and DVD this week. We had Neighbours 2. We got a couple of other things. What I'm interested about, I haven't bought it yet because I've been so busy I've not even been able to go to the shops and buy it. But the Blu-ray of the week I'm going to be talking about is The People v. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is about the O.J. Simpson trial in the 90s. Was it the 90s? I think it was the 90s. Yeah, it was the 90s. I was right. Sorry, it's a Monday night. I'm getting kind of tired. I need tea. Yeah, and it's based off a book by Jeffrey Toobin called The Run of His Life: The People v. O.J. Simpson, and it is a 10-episode series from the makers of American Horror Story, hence the name American Crime Story. 10-episode series. At the Emmys last night, it received 22, 23 Emmy nominations, and it won 9. It won 9 Emmys last night. It was a huge success, and it's a great show. It's really, really good. The performances are absolutely amazing. Cuba Gooding Jr. is great as O.J. Simpson, because sort of this really mentally disturbed person who's just completely towing the line between trying to be a sympathetic figure but also just a brute who has probably done the terrible things that he's been accused of. But one of the real standouts in this series is John Travolta as Robert Shapiro, who is one of the people representing O.J. Simpson in the trial. And he's got an extensive makeup job, and he's just got this really, he just looks like he's come straight from the gallows. He looks like he stepped from the third circle of hell. He is a caricature, but John Travolta absolutely owns it. David Schwimmer's great as well. Sarah Paulson as well, who was Emmy nominated. I think she might have even won as well. She did a terrific job. But I think what's amazing is that this is a perfect example of the perfect creative team adapting the perfect story for them. You've got the producers of American Horror Story, which I've not seen all of. I've only seen a couple of seasons of it, but it's basically a kitchen sink approach to horror. The first series is it takes place in a haunted house, and that really is a kitchen sink approach to horror. It throws every single horror trope at that series, kind of to its detriment, but it kind of shows just how steeped in horror mythology and the horror genre these creators are. And the fact that instead of working on more horror programming, they worked on American crime, I think kind of speaks volumes about the type of story that this is. Because the trial of O.J. Simpson was the O.J. Simpson's legal team were able to pick up on this when they knew that they had a sympathetic black figure, and if they were able to appeal to the, for lack of a better term, the black community, they may be able to get a lot of sympathy on O.J. Simpson's side, and they might be able to win the trial, which is where a lot of the drama from the TV show comes from. And the fact that they were able to manipulate the public opinion through the legal system, it is a horror story. It may say it's an American crime story, but this is a horrifying true story, and I think the fact that it's the American Horror Story people who are adapting this book, these true life events, I think it's the perfect creative team, and the performances are great. It's out on Blu-ray right now. It's been out for about a week, but it is my Blu-ray of the week. The People v. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story. All 10 episodes are on Blu-ray now. It wouldn't surprise me if it's going to be hitting Netflix very, very soon, and its Emmy nominations and its wins were very well deserved. It is one of the best pieces of television I've seen in the past 12 months. Absolutely outstanding, and is on DVD and Blu-ray right now. So let's go to the Patreon questions. Dean Jones, you were the only one to submit a question last week, and you're the only one who did it this week. Guys, on Patreon, there's like 10 of you. I am asking you every week for questions. You've got to respond. I'm giving you time to do it. But anyway, Dean Jones asks, when will I officially be knighted Sir Dean Jones of Film Brits? I thought you already were. I think that was actually already a thing that me and Sam did a while ago. But since you're the one who is asking all of the questions, then yes, Dean Jones, I dub thee Sir Dean Jones of Film Brits. I look like I'm karate chopping you. Anyway, your question. In all seriousness, in the next James Bond film, would you want to see Christoph Waltz's character back or have a standalone villain? Now, that question depends on two factors. One, does Christoph Waltz want to come back? And two, is Daniel Craig coming back? Because I think if Daniel Craig comes back, then yeah, Christoph Waltz's character, spoiler warning, Blofeld, he can work in a follow-up. He can work as a continuation of Daniel Craig's Bond as a villain. Maybe not as the main villain, maybe as a side villain, maybe as the one who maybe he hires or is working with an actual the main villain. Maybe he is one cog in a bigger machine, or maybe he's the lead cog in the machine. I think you need to surround more interesting characters around him. But if it is a different actor, if it is Tom Hiddleston, if it is Damian Lewis, if it is, I don't know, The Rock, which would be a pretty cool Bond, if it was a different actor, then you might want to abandon Christoph Waltz entirely, maybe wait a couple of films until bringing him back in, or maybe even bring in Blofeld as played by a different actor. That might be the best way to go with that. But for Christoph Waltz's Blofeld, he was a decent villain. I think he kind of paled in comparison to Javier Bardem and even Mads Mikkelsen to a degree. I think that Blofeld, while a good villain, I think the film around him, the whole production of it and Daniel Craig's performance and everything was a lot more interesting than the actual villain himself. I was not particularly interested in the adopted brother dynamic. I think they didn't invest enough time in that relationship. I really like Spectre. I like it a lot. It made my honourable mentions of 2015, but Blofeld and the story surrounding him was not the reason that I liked the film so much. So I'm quite indifferent as to whether or not I want to see Christoph Waltz's character back. But if we did have a standalone villain, I'd want it to be not one that's linked to Bond's past. They've done that three, four films in a row. I loved Spectre, but you gotta stop having this big conspiracy around James Bond and the whole, the villain was someone from his past, the villain was someone from MI6 or MI5, and that's played out. I love Spectre, but it really was the last chance, that it was the last time when they could do that. They need to have new villains, they need to have new stories moving forward as opposed to relying on James Bond's past. They need to have maybe a new organization or some new terrorist threat for Bond to fight. You got to go back to basics in the next Bond film. That's absolutely essential. I'm interested in what they're going to be doing, because really we should have an announcement by now, really. They kind of make Bond films every 3 to 4 years, so it wouldn't surprise me if over the next few months we would either be getting a casting announcement or a new director announcement. But there is still that whole thing up in the air about the James Bond rights, because Sony only had the rights to do one more Bond film, and then the rights are going to be auctioned off. And all of the movie studios are going to get an opportunity to bid for the rights. And Sony, if they're able to outbid the competition, can win them back. But I'd like to see a company like maybe Universal or Warner Brothers or Disney, maybe see them, see what they would do with the James Bond franchise. And if they did change movie studios, they probably would want a brand new creative team and a brand new Bond as well. I don't believe these stories saying that Daniel Craig has been offered £150 million to return as Bond, because Daniel Craig is a great Bond, and he has been in one of the most successful eras of Bond ever. We've got Skyfall made over $1 billion, but Daniel Craig's not the reason people go and watch a Bond movie. If that was the case, Bond would not have survived this long, because we've come to expect different Bonds. We've come to expect change in the franchise. It wouldn't surprise me if the next Bond had, let's say hypothetically, we had Tom Hiddleston as James Bond. It wouldn't surprise me if Ben Whishaw and Ray Fiennes stayed. It wouldn't surprise me if his supporting cast stayed the same, but it was just a different Bond and no one brought it up. That might be the best way to go with this franchise if Daniel Craig does not come back, because there's a terrific ensemble cast around him. But James Bond, the actor playing James Bond, is not the key factor as to why those films are so successful. It's the action set pieces, it's the locations, it's the gadgets, it's the theme, it's the aesthetics of Bond, it's the style and the flair and the glamour and the British film industry really working to make one huge blockbuster over the course of a couple of years. That is what gets people's butts in seats, and I think that Skyfall would have made over $1 billion regardless of the actor playing Bond, within reason. Like maybe if it was Jack Black as James Bond, it wouldn't have made $1 billion, but you get what I mean. Daniel Craig, he is not worth £150 million to keep on playing Bond. I don't think any actor is, even if it was like Sean Connery in his prime, or Pierce Brosnan, or Timothy Dalton, or Roger Moore. No actor playing James Bond is worth £150 million. He is not like Tony Stark as Iron Man, where he has completely enveloped the character, where even the comic books and the video games and the TV series of Iron Man, the cartoons, have been forced to morph around Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal and mimic him. There have been like half a dozen Bonds before Daniel Craig, and they're going to be half a dozen more after Craig. And Craig is not the reason those films are so successful. It is the James Bond name, and it's the fact that Skyfall is a legitimately great film as well. That's one reason it made over $1 billion, folks. So yeah, as for Christoph Waltz, it depends on if they bring Daniel Craig back and if they scrap the continuity. Really, if you'd asked that question and Sony still had one film left in their contract, it would be a much more legitimate answer. But right now, with the rights up in the air as they are, why have the rights not been sold? There's meant to be this auction. People are meant to be bidding for the rights to James Bond, but people keep on talking about, will Daniel Craig return? We don't know yet. We don't even know which studio is going to be distributing the next Bond, let alone who's going to be playing the next Bond. And I think that the studio has to come first, you know? I don't know, it's just that we just need to know what's happening with Bond before we can really talk about the casting of it. But anyway, that's just me. So yeah, let's get to some lightning round Twitter questions. Now, I will be talking about movie news over the next few episodes and everything, but it has been just a slow news week, and I may even do a couple of reviews here and there, but I haven't had much time to see much. But yeah, let's do some quick fire questions on Twitter. Now, I was actually smart and asked people on Twitter before I started recording, so I've actually got quite a few here. So let's take a look right there. Okay, Patrick asks, Sherlock Abominable Bride Emmy win reaction, please. Yes, Abominable Bride won an Emmy. Let me just look that up. Abominable Bride. I was kind of surprised when I saw that as well, because Abominable Bride, I remember I liked it, but I only liked it. I don't really remember much from it. Yes, the episode won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Television Movie, which is the first Sherlock episode to win that category. It beat A Very Murray Christmas, Luther, Confirmation, and All the Way. Honestly, I've not heard of those, but All the Way! I really wanted to watch that. That's the it's when Bryan Cranston is playing Lyndon B. Johnson, and it's directed by Jay Roach, who did Trumbo, and Trumbo's a terrific film, and it's got Anthony Mackie as Martin Luther King, Melissa Leo as Lady Bird Johnson, Frank Langella as Richard Russell. Yeah, I really wanted to watch that. I didn't even realise it was out yet. Oh, I need to watch that. But yeah, Abominable Bride. I can't really talk about whether or not it was deserving because I've not seen the rest of the categories, but if you were to rank how many episodes are there? 10? All 10 episodes of Sherlock, Abominable Bride would probably be in the bottom half, to be honest. It's kind of like how I was annoyed when Doctor Who it was when people were complaining about Doctor Who not winning a Hugo Award and Game of Thrones was winning. Doctor Who did not deserve to win those awards, and if it wins those awards, it kind of enables them. It's like, yes, you did a mediocre job, here's an award, well done. We know you can do better, but yeah, I'm looking forward to Series 4 of Sherlock, but it just feels like that Steve Moffat and Mark Gatiss have kind of completely lost sight of what they want to do with the show, but it'd be interesting where they take the Moriarty story. So, Abominable Bride, Emmy reaction. I've not seen the other nominees, unfortunately, but I probably wouldn't give it an award regardless of what category it was in, because it was just okay. It's literally left no impact on me. I've not watched it since it came out. I've had no desire to watch it. Anyway, okay. Miles the Junkman asks, if you could make a film, who would be your ideal cast? Blimey, that's a loaded question. Well, if I could make a film... Well, if I could make... Well, one film I really would love to make is actually a... it's actually a horror drama, like a spiritual like horror film about a family and the ghosts of their past and stuff like that, but I'm not going to spoil the whole thing. But really, in terms of making a film, I just love working with the people around me and people that I've already worked with in the past, like a lot of my friends who did Meat Space and a lot of my friends who have worked with in terms of like cast and crew and actors, and so I never really think about, oh, I'd get Bryan Cranston in this, I'd get Arnold Schwarzenegger to play the lovable dad. I wouldn't. I don't tend to think about that. I guess kind of think, oh, I want to write a script. If I am going to make it, who can I realistically get? Oh, my friend who does a lot of theatre and does a lot of stuff that I've worked with before. Yeah, I'll cast them in the co-lead. I kind of think more like that, as opposed to, in a perfect world, I'd get Robert Downey Jr. I would get Chloe Grace Moretz. I would get Arnold Schwarzenegger as the lovable grandmother. I'd just cast him as all of the parents, clearly. So that's kind of what I think about when if I was going to make a film. It would be, obviously, because I can't afford Arnold Schwarzenegger, especially if I'm giving him 4 paychecks as playing the mum, dad, grandmother, and the grandfather. That's just way above my pay grade, unfortunately. I'm going to need a lot of Patreon dollar for that. But that's mainly when I think about when I make a cast, when I think of a cast for a film I would like to make. So, Jason Voorhees 2011, that sounds like a straight to DVD Jason X sequel, doesn't it? Jason Goes to Space again. Do you think the DCEU can salvage itself without the need of a reboot, and if so, how can it? See, the great thing about Flashpoint in DC is that it is a reboot, but you don't have to call it a reboot. What you do is that you keep the great cast, you keep Ben Affleck, you keep Henry Cavill, Margot Robbie, and everyone else, and Jeremy Irons. You keep all of these guys, these really talented actors who would be a fit for the material if the material was working in the first place, and you get rid of the aspects that aren't working, Jesse Eisenberg, Jared Leto, and then you recast them as, say, Bryan Cranston or Leonardo DiCaprio. I keep on bringing up Bryan Cranston, but it's fitting. And replace the cast members, but you keep going. You don't say it's a reboot. This isn't like Spider-Man and then The Amazing Spider-Man, where you swap Tobey Maguire for Andrew Garfield, or and you swap all of the actors around, you replace J.K. Simmons with nobody, etc., etc. You just keep going, and you kind of acknowledge it as a soft reboot, but you keep the same actors, it's the same continuity. We're just changing things up. I think that honestly is the best way to go. I think as soon as Suicide Squad leaves theatres, we're going to have an announcement that Jared Leto is not going to be the Joker anymore. It just makes all of the sense in the world. But if it were to salvage itself without a reboot, it would have to do with moving the story forward with a lot of standalone films or Justice League, but just not acknowledging Suicide Squad, not acknowledging Batman v Superman, apart from the very broad strokes of it. Like, oh, we did fight one time and Doomsday came along and then you died, but whatever, we're just water under the bridge. And then just, it's not rebooting, it's just ignoring the past. Like, kind of like how Marvel Studios kind of ignores the events of The Incredible Hulk. Not because The Incredible Hulk is bad, it's actually probably my favourite movie of Phase 1 apart from The Avengers, but it's sort of that approach. Like, you're not completely dismissing it, you just don't acknowledge it anymore, and I think that is the way forward for DC once we've got past Justice League, as Justice League, while it was able to sort of maybe course correct slightly because of the reaction to Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman, it's still in too deep. Once we get to Justice League and the films afterwards, that's when Warner Brothers can really start really learning from the mistakes of the past and blazing forward to try and course correct. But they're in a really awkward position because they put so much stock in Zack Snyder's vision and it's just not paid off. But they're in too deep. They're in way too deep and they can't turn around now. So they've got a course correct. They just can't turn around or properly reboot at the moment. So, Ryan Palmer asks, how long do you think it will be before audiences get bored of superhero movies and cinematic universes in general? Keep in mind, there's only 2 cinematic universes out now at the moment. It's DC and Marvel. And even then, DC are still kind of tiptoeing their way to crossing over characters. It's really when Wonder Woman happens that you'll have a lot more acknowledgement of it being a cinematic universe, because you've got Wonder Woman stepping into different franchises. But we've also got the Universal Monsters franchise, which I'm really looking forward to. And the thing about cinematic universes is that Universal were doing this in the 30s and 40s. They just weren't calling it a cinematic universe. They did have stories where the Wolfman and Dracula and Frankenstein and the Invisible Man, they would cross over into each other's movies. They were in one big universe. They just didn't call it a cinematic universe. You could say that Universal were doing cinematic universes before it was cool, because they literally were doing it. And the fact that they're doing it again, and they're getting people like The Rock, Javier Bardem, Tom Cruise, Russell Crowe, Angelina Jolie, apparently, getting all of these great talented people on board for that, I'm really interested in that. I want to see what they do with it. I'm really looking forward to that, actually. But in terms of people getting bored of it, when they start stretching it like it's a Fast and Furious cinematic universe, and it's the Hasbro cinematic universe, and it's the Call of Duty cinematic universe, it's gonna eventually peter itself out, because audiences can be very fickle, and as proven by this past summer, they're very selective about what they want to see. We don't care if it's Independence Day 2, don't want to see it, we don't care, we'd rather go see Captain America Civil War, we'd rather go see Suicide Squad, we would rather go see Kung Fu Panda 3, we'd rather see Deadpool, we'd rather see this other stuff. If you have too many cinematic universes, you are going to completely saturate the market, and yet basically, if every franchise is a cinematic universe, you're going to kill the lower tier films, you're going to kill those smaller counter programming films, and I don't think studios are dumb enough to let that happen. I think that Universal wants their Fast and Furious, and they want their Universal Monsters universe, but I think if Universal Monsters does well for them, they will just keep on making Fast and Furious films, and they won't have it be a cinematic universe. Paramount wants a cinematic universe, but we don't really. I think that's going to be the Hasbro-verse, like Transformers, G.I. Joe, and all of their other toy franchises. Companies, I think, are only going to limit themselves to one cinematic universe per company, per movie studio, because they'd end up cannibalizing each other, and they are fully aware of the fact that them and other movie studios are in a, like, they're in a big machine, and it's a self-sustaining machine where they have to keep on making good movies, because if they make a good movie, then someone will be like, oh, I had a great time at the movies, let's go see this other movie. If you have a bad time at a movie, you're probably going to be less inclined to go again anytime soon. And movie studios know this. It's why Disney is secretly rooting for Warner Brothers and DC to do well, because if a superhero movie is doing well at the box office, it means that their next one will be even more likely to do well at the box office. They're not in competition with each other. In fact, there was even James Gunn on Twitter the other day who was talking to Patty Jenkins, who was going to be directing Wonder Woman, and James Gunn was like, I can't wait to see your movie. And I think it's amazing that the directors of these DC and Marvel films are supportive of each other, but the fans want to kill each other. So these guys are setting a great example. Let's just hope the movie-going community does it. But yeah, I think that they're not going to get bored of cinematic universes at the moment, but if every single studio is doing 2 or 3 at the same time, they're going to get bored. There's not enough money from the audience to go around, and I think movie studios are not going to let that happen. So next question from Garen Howells. What are some of the most controversial opinions on movies you have? For example, I don't think Kubo was a good film. I'm seeing Kubo tomorrow. Can't wait to see it. Controversial opinions on movies. Every year there's like one Oscar contender that I think is absolutely pants. And there's stuff like American Hustle, American Sniper, The Blind Side, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, The Revenant. Those are probably some of my more controversial opinions, because I think that American Sniper is a xenophobic piece of pro-war propaganda. Mostly because it is a xenophobic piece of pro-war propaganda. It's controversial because I don't like that fact. And like American Hustle, I think is just a style over substance, really badly done film. And I'm just not a fan of David O. Russell as a director either. Nothing to do with his personal life or anything. I just don't think he makes good movies apart from The Fighter. The Fighter was pretty good. So that's probably the most controversial opinion I have. Oh, and also probably the most controversial thing I've said ever on YouTube is I think it's stupid to hate Ghostbusters sight unseen, and I think it's stupid to harass critics who have seen the movie and liked it, but instead shower praise on people who have openly admitted that they've not even seen the movie, but or just whatever. That's probably the most controversial thing I've ever said, if the like to dislike bar on my YouTube videos is any indication. Terminator Rants asks, thoughts on Filthy Frank? I've never heard of Filthy. I'm scared to Google this in case something comes up. Filthy Frank is the embodiment of everything a person should not be. He is anti-PC, anti-social, and anti-couth. 3.2 million subscribers. Yeah, I've never heard of this guy. Okay, I hate vegans, fried noodles, Pokemon Go is the end of humanity, loser reads hate comments 5, it's just a prank, bro, how to get a man, people I hate. Yeah, I've never heard of this guy. Just looking at his thumbnails, it just looks like content that I would really not enjoy. So yeah, I have no opinion on Filthy Frank. Okay, Graham Williamson asks, Bond or Potter? I have not watched every single Bond film. I have maybe a couple more left to watch, and even the ones I have watched, I've not watched for a very long time. But Potter is probably it's probably my franchise. When people were crying at the Star Wars trailer when Han Solo said Chewie, we're home, I didn't cry at that. I would cry at a moment like that in the Harry Potter trailer, like 10-15 years from now, because it came at just the right time for me and my generation. I was just getting into watching movies more, and it's also the fact that you can visit this world and it's so incredibly well realized, and you literally aged along with these characters, and it had a great, mostly consistent ensemble cast because of course Dumbledore died, and it's just arrived at the perfect time. I think all of the films are between good and masterpieces. I think there are some incredible films in that franchise as well, whereas Bond, a lot of the older stuff has not aged incredibly well, and we've still got a few flops like Quantum of Solace or Die Another Day. Yeah, not great stuff. I think Bond doesn't have as good a track record, but to be fair, it's been going on a lot longer. So, okay, the final question from #DWSR Doctor Who Sausage Roll. Do you believe a perfect film exists? No, because it kind of depends on what you're looking for in a film. No, a perfect film does not exist, because what is perfection? I'm sure a lot of people were like, Citizen Kane is perfect, but I'm sure there are a few people who could be like, it's a bit long, some of the dialogue's a bit stilted, that one actor wasn't very good. So I don't think a perfect film exists, except if in your eyes it is perfect. I don't know. I've never considered any film perfect, even some of the films that I love the most, even some of the best films of all time have some inconsistency. Like, for example, in Toy Story. Toy Story is a wonderful film, 10 out of 10, awesome, great stuff. However, why is Buzz Lightyear pretending to be a toy if he thinks he's real? It's stuff like that kind of, once you think it, you cannot unthink it. It's one of those suspension of disbelief moments that you kind of have to accept in order for the film to work. Like the ending of Terminator 2. If the ending of Terminator 2 is as all as it seems, the events of the Terminator films can never really happen, which is like a big feedback loop and time travel, and I've gone cross-eyed. So yeah, there's no such thing as a perfect film, but then again, you should always strive for perfection, but it's one of those things that you can never actually achieve. It's something that you should strive for because it makes you better. You should always strive to be better, but you cannot actually be a perfect. You cannot make a perfect film. There's too many moving pieces. There's too many cogs in the machine. That's a phrase I've been saying a lot. Cogs in the machine. I apologize for that. Getting a bit redundant, but yeah. So I don't think a perfect film exists, nor do I want a perfect film to exist. Because as soon as a perfect film exists, there's no point in making films anymore, and that would be a very boring world to live in. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast. It's a bit shorter than I would like to have planned it to be, because hopefully I would get more Patreon questions. But yeah, if you are sick of Dean Jones being the only knight of the podcast and him being the only person asking the questions, even though there are 13 patrons, I've checked, there are 13 of you that can potentially ask questions every single week. But if you want to be asking questions, if you want to be contributing to the topics, if you have a soapbox, if you want a soapbox, and if you want to spout an opinion, or if you want to ask my opinion on something, or if you want to talk or debate about something on the podcast, then please get in touch through the Patreon link and be sure to pledge and get some exclusive perks. You get this podcast a day early as well if you're a patron, regardless of what tier you're on. And it also helps me out a lot. Like I said, my laptop might be on the frizzle a little bit, so I might need to be getting a new one soon. So yeah, Patreon is really going to help out with that as well. I massively appreciate it. So thank you very much for listening to Film Brits. Be sure to subscribe to me on iTunes if you haven't already and leave a review. You can follow my SoundCloud at www.soundcloud.com/filmbrits, patreon.com/Trilbee, my website www.trilbee.com, and thank you so much for listening to Film Brits episode 2, and I shall see you folks next week for hopefully something film related and not TV related, but we'll see what the week brings us. Take care folks, my name is Trilbee and I'll see you next week.